So if you're fortunate enough to be able to purchase a house, there's one bit of information, well, there's a lot of information that's important, but it's really important to know what that house is worth, especially if you're going to borrow money. You want to know that you are not paying too much money for this house. So you need to know what the actual investment is for the house before you make an investment. If the investment or the match is off, then it's likely that you will lose money when you try to sell the house. And if there's a trend for many houses to be for the prices to be inflated, then we talk about that being a housing bubble or a real estate bubble. And what happens is the market corrects itself. So you have the investments, the market just crashes when there is that recalibration with the market. So you want to make sure that there's this realistic evaluation of the value of this house before you purchase it. Now, what does this have to do with brains, and what are brain bubbles? Well, brains are interesting. We have a human brain here. The human brain takes up about 2% of our body's real estate. So it's 2% of our body weight, which isn't a lot, but it requires 20% of all of our resources, our fuel, oxygen and glucose. So we're using a lot of energy. The brain's an energy hog. We're using a lot of energy to maintain and operate this brain. So we have to be careful where our investments are with our brain as well. With our brains, we have different areas that are bringing in lots of sensory information to help us kind of calibrate the market. So we have vision and sounds that are coming in, information about the body, smells, a lot of sensory information that is coming into the brain to help us generate a realistic view about what's going on around us, to help us determine where to make our investments. If something is distorted so that we're not getting actual, authentic, realistic information, we may generate a brain bubble. And this could be as problematic as the housing bubble or the real estate bubble if it changes our behavior and our decisions, distorts it in a way that can be dangerous or unrealistic. So we can get an emotional crash, just like the market crash. Now, there are several things in life that can distort the information coming into our brains. Psychiatric drugs, or drugs that influence our mental processes, can distort when we're feeling good, and we may interpret it as, oh, when I'm healthy, my brain feels great, but it's that shortcut to the reward that the drug is doing. Or maybe we have a psychiatric illness on board, and that is distorting the interpretation of sensory information or our past experiences so that it looks like things are never as good as they are and could lead to something like depression. Or celebrity. Maybe our world we're surrounded by people who tell us that we're a wonderful artist or a great singer or everything is perfect that we do. That can distort our interpretation of the world around us. And when reality does set in, we can have this brain bubble and emotional crash similar to the housing market crash. So anything that we can do to keep our brains authentic and realistic and minimize the distortions would be very healthy for brains. It's interesting to think of the term aesthetic. In a way, our brains are an aesthetic organ. We think of this term as more related to beauty, but the origins are this Greek term that referred to perception through the senses. And the more senses, the more data points, the more information that we have coming in from the brain, the more informed view that we have of the world around us, the less likely it's less likely that we're going to generate these brain bubbles that can lead us into these false or these unhealthy paths. So that we want to have a fully sensing, perceiving brain along the lines of this origin of the term aesthetic. What we don't want is anesthetic. We only want an anesthetic situation or to be anesthetized when we're truly trying to block something out, like pain. So if we're having surgery, yes, anesthesia is important. But making decisions going through life day to day, we want a fully sensing, perceiving brain. When this is distorted, many of us, as we go through life, we feel how uncomfortable and dangerous it is and unnatural it is to have these distortions of reality. For example, if you wake up and you're remembering a dream, or it feels like you've been in a dream, and it takes you a few minutes to realize, oh, is this the dream or is it reality? We feel very fearful and uncomfortable and out of our comfort zone when we cannot figure out what is truly reality. Also, there's the fascinating case of John Nash, and you may remember that he won the Nobel Prize in 1994. And speaking of economics and markets, he was a genius mathematician, obviously winning the Nobel Prize. And he won the prize for generating a behavioral economics, kind of game theory type of hypothesis and theory. But I mention him now because he was also diagnosed with schizophrenia. And this had a huge impact on his career and his ability to function, because he had hallucinations and delusions of people and beings that were trying to threaten him. And when asked about why he believed them, he was this genius mathematician. Why did you believe that these people were trying to destroy you, or there were supernatural beings that were trying to threaten you? He said those ideas came to him in the same way that his mathematical ideas did. It was difficult for his brain to discern between reality and this false perception of a world, and that led to many problems. And toward the end of his life, he did find some reality, and he was able to accept the prize. But it gives you a sense of how uncomfortable it is when you do not know the difference between fiction and reality, and these bubbles are being created. Now, so our brains are processing information to give us a realistic view of the world around us. And this is important for decisions. So our brains do a lot of things to keep us alive and to keep us fully functioning, but it also is important in helping us make decisions. Our life is full of decisions. Some are really easy decisions. So if I am presented with two cakes, and one is chocolate and one is cabbage, based on my experiences in history, I'm going to go for the chocolate cake. That doesn't seem to take a lot of my brain energy. That's going to be a quick decision. But a lot of decisions in life aren't that easy. They are related, what we have is uncertainty about the decisions. Decisions about careers. Do you decide to go into education, or to become that chef, or to marry this person, or to have a child, or to buy this house, or to buy brand X toothpaste or brand Y toothpaste? Our lives are filled with uncertainty. And uncertainty makes us somewhat uncomfortable as we try to make a decision about what should we decide, and that we feel comfortable about that. We've looked at decisions with rats, and it's interesting. So if we look at our rat models, and our rats they don't work for money, but they work for, the market here, but they work for Fruit Loops, these colorful little pieces of cereal. And we have arranged or designed several studies that utilize something we refer to as effort-based rewards. And we teach the animals that they go in this arena every day, and there are mounds of bedding, and in those mounds are these yummy Fruit Loops. And we teach them systematically, it takes a while, that if they look around, use their senses to see where the mounds are, and then gently dig, that effort will produce the reward. So it's effort-based rewards. And so they're learning to make connections about being in tune with their environment around them to see how it changes, and then make decisions about where to go to get the rewards. But the kicker is, and how it's related to decisions and uncertainty, is another task. And this is a spatial maze, and there are lots of versions of spatial mazes out there. And there are certain places, little cups or wells, where they could get a Fruit Loop. And we systematically alter it where there is ultimately only one place for the Fruit Loop. So they learn every day, go in, and regardless of where we start them, they know to go to this area for the Fruit Loop. So we're testing their memory, their learning and memory. But the true test is when we take this away, and that well where they were certain they would get the reward is no longer there. So we've created this uncertainty, this uncomfortable uncertainty, and we're interested in what they do. Well, they hang around where they expect the reward to be, and that makes sense, and that shows that they have memory, and that memory is strong, but they also employ other strategies, such as rearing up and looking around to survey, to use their senses to find information about where that Fruit Loop may be, or visiting other wells. So I think that's really smart, and they're using their memories and their sensory experiences to make the most informed decision in this, what we call a dry land maze. And this would probably serve a wild rat very well. All of a sudden, food's no longer in this patch of forest or a field where it used to be, and so that you need to move on and use your strategies to find the next, area where that has food. So using experiences, we feel builds what we call experiential or contingency capital. Just like we are interested in building financial capital, we need contingency or experiential capital to make decisions when we have uncertain situations. Now, this word contingency is related to making predictions and probabilities. Maybe you didn't do so well in your high school statistics class, but your brain is always generating these probabilities. If I go for brand X or Y, how is that going to turn out? So we're not even aware of that sometimes, but the more experience we have, sensations, experiences, memories, the bigger the investment, the investment that we can draw on to make these decisions. One of the kind of a fun example of how this has been applied, looking at the importance of authentic sensory experiences in our decisions and our behavior, is an unknown, unexpected place, a comedy club that I ran across outside of LA. So people are going, and lots of laughter. This particular comedy club, they have a drink maximum instead of minimum. So a lot of places will have a 2-drink minimum because they want to pay for, get money to pay for these comedians. Whereas this place has a 2-drink maximum because they don't want to anesthetize the brains of the audience, because this particular comedy club wants the comedians to get a realistic check on how funny their material is. And if their audience is anesthetized with alcohol, that's not going to give them a good reality check. So a well-known comedian, Jay Leno, would go there even at the height of his career on the Tonight Show. He knew he was good at this comedian thing, but he was very grounded in that he would check out the contingencies, do this contingency check to see which jokes are generating the laughter and which ones are not. And you don't need a distorted audience. That's going to distort the reality and the feedback that you get. So it's important to build this capital, to never be too sure of yourself without having these periodic checks so that you can make the best decisions. And related to this idea of economics, there's an exciting area in the field known as neuroeconomics. And this is about making decisions when there's not a clear choice. And this started in the 1990s and involved, in this case, some monkeys. And they were recording from certain cells in the brains of these monkeys when they were presented with a task where there wasn't a clear solution. So this task was very kind of simple. It involved dots, and some were going in this direction and some would be going in another direction, but actually they would be all the same color. So there's just this subtle movement of dots going in these directions. And I want to give our monkey a tail there. And so the monkey received a reward when it could determine where most of the dots were going. Are most of them going in this direction or that direction? So as the animal was looking and trying to decide, because it wasn't clear, there is an area of the brain, and kind of this area, known as, we'll just call it the LIP, and it's in the parietal, the lateral parietal lobe. And this parietal lobe is involved in sensation about the body. So as that animal's trying to make that decision, these cells are active. And maybe it's about movement and spatial, so it makes sense that an area and that area of the brain is involved in this particular task. But a lot of research has been done on decision making, and it takes a lot of brain power and areas, and they're integrated, coordinated cooperation to enable an animal to make, or us to make, a decision. So we have that area that's involved in uncertainty, and we have areas in our prefrontal cortex and the medial and the lateral area that's important for making decisions. And we also have an area known as the orbitofrontal cortex that's important in making decisions. And those are just a few of the areas that are activated as you're trying to decide brand X or brand Y, this cake or this piece of pie, or which career that you want. In order to help these areas of the brain work most effectively and efficiently, we need to have real information coming in about the world around us. And the more rich our experiences are through effort-based rewards or education or just different engaging experiences through our lives, we can make more informed decisions. When I was growing up, there was a popular show, I think there's a reboot of it now, called MacGyver. And MacGyver he would be in these very dangerous situations, and he could take something like a paper clip and a ball of twine and make a pulley that would save 28 people from an earthquake or some kind of situation. Based on his cognitive capital and contingency calculations that his brain's making based on these experiences and reading the moment, it's a fun story that he had these innovative problem-solving situations. So that's fun to watch. It's the brain maybe at its best when it's fully aesthetic and reading the world around us. So as we navigate through life and we're trying to move from confusion to clarity, and that's really what life is, to try to decide what is the best course of action, the best path to make. It shouldn't just be a gut feeling or an instinct. Sometimes very simple responses are based on that. It's bringing in as many data points as possible to make the most informed decision. So the most effective brains are going to be those brains that are continuously sensing and processing and building these neural networks. And as we get into new situations, we can use these networks in different ways to solve the problems that life may present for us. So the best treatment, RX, for these toxic brain bubbles is just living, is living a real life without artificial distortions of the world around us. So keeping it real is the way to avoid these toxic brain bubbles.